Hi, so I'm going to talk a little bit about um, meritocracy and education and hierarchy and governmental systems today. So I don't know everything about this topic. I'm just giving some ideas. I kind of wanted to respond to some things that were some criticism of American school systems and what they call the idea of the Prussian school system. And I'm not saying that you know the Prussian school system or whatever that American schooling originated from is perfect. One of the things I think they suggested in these videos I've seen is that it promotes sort of a drone-like thinking or lack of creativity. And like I said, I don't have a whole bunch of knowledge. If you know more, you have some sources you'd like to share, and you bothered to watch this video, feel free to send them to me. But what I want to talk about is what was before the Prussian school system, which was nepotism. So back in olden days, when you had a government, the person at the center of the government, say a king, who would they put in charge? Usually like their cousin or their brother, because that was someone they could trust. That's nepotism. And that works, I guess, but wouldn't it be better, instead of hiring your cousin or your brother who you can trust, to actually hire someone that's very competent and knowledgeable? So, when you have that, you have this idea of, hiring someone based on merit or expertise. So where does that come from? Well, here's a little book. This book's called Civil Examinations and Meritocracy in Late Imperial China. And it's saying that this idea of testing people for their qualifications, rather than just because you're close to them or you trust them or you like them or they give you something like a bribe, you're going to hire them because they're very qualified. So it started, I guess, in the Tang Dynasty, just regionally in a certain part of China, in the southern part of China. And it reached sort of the imperial level during the Ming Dynasty. Now, how did this sort of come to be? Well, when the first Ming emperor came into power, he sort of had a purge where he killed a lot of the administrators and people running the show. And so there was sort of a power vacuum. He needed to fill all these positions. So he nationalized these testing things. And this book goes through all these painful headaches that go through, trying to create a system that's fair, to say, all we want is the most qualified person. And so we're going to create a test to do that. And then, of course, immediately people start figuring out how to cheat or play some game where they don't really actually have to learn anything. They can hide a cheat sheet in their pocket, or bribe someone. So there were all sorts of headaches. And as the book talks about, by the time you get to the 20th century, the Chinese were adopting European and Japanese education models for training and educating people based on expertise. So if it originated in China, how did it get over to Europe and then eventually adopted in the United States with our American Prussian school system in New England in the 1840s? So what I understand is that it was the Jesuits that were in China, and they brought it over to Europe, and these ideas of merit and competence were sort of in coming to, you know, coming to Europe. And here again, like I said, I don't have all the play-by-play narratives of how this stuff is playing out and how systems change from, nepotism to meritocratic systems. But this book's, I'm going to just read a little excerpt. This is from The Pursuit of Power by William McNeill. And this section is talking about the military, and rather than commissioned officers or officers of, from high class ranks, they're moving more towards expertise. And this is during sort of the Napoleonic War era. So, schooling for artillerymen had been long-standing in every European army since the technicalities of gunnery were complex enough to require it. But to make schooling general for all officers, the requirement to require examinations to test what had been learned before certifying that the individual in question was qualified for appointment or promotion was a new idea. Later, from 1808 onwards, some Prussian officers owed their position to their intellectual attainments. Such persons encouraged one another to apply their minds to professional questions as new problems and possibilities arose, much in the style and spirit of General Gribeauval. The creation of the great General Staff between 1803 and 1809 provided an organizational stronghold within the Prussian army for intellectually vigorous officers. Appointment came only after a man had distinguished himself in the advanced school for officers seeking to qualify for higher commands. The General Staff was responsible for planning possible future campaigns in peacetime, a radical and dubiously moral step when first proposed. For the purpose it was necessary to collect topographical and other intelligence and study what had been done well or badly in campaigns from former times, and to criticize tactics and strategy as simulated in peacetime maneuvers, and on and on and on. So what they're talking about is, again, this idea of merit, using ideas, not just whoever's in charge and gets the higher position is just because they're born into the family, or the leader owes them a favor or something along those lines. For the United States, of course, we had many political appointments were just appointed because they were owed during political favors. If you want to get elected president, you had to promise people a lot of stuff, say, I'll give you this job and I'll give you that job. And there's certain jobs today that, maybe they're a little bit like that, but we do have civil service examinations, which came, in the second half of the 1800s. So of course, there are problems with this. You try to create some sort of standard or bar, and of course, people are going to try to figure out how to get around it and cheat around it. And also, if you make this bar, lots of people, maybe they're going to follow the rules, but they're only going to go up to this bar, and they're not going to think any differently, because if they think any differently, what's the point in that? You get punished. Or you're too different. You're not going to get a promotion because you're thinking differently. So, of course, there's a lot of complexity to this, but of course, also you have to understand where the system came from, which was before, like I said, was nepotism. So I'll stop there. That's my little thought about the complexity of how systems and organizations, institutions have evolved over time, and how they're still a massive headache. All right.